All right, let me pull up. And I'll swap this. So 1 second. Let's move this out of the way. Okay. So thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Great opportunity to share just some of the latest information on what we're seeing out there in the threat landscape. My role at HP is Global Security Category Manager, which is a very long-winded way of saying I help to articulate with my team our 5 to 10 year portfolio vision for broadly across our consumer print business, as well as commercial print business. And I work very closely with our colleagues on the personal systems side. We have a pan-HP security capability that spans both the personal systems side, of course, and our print. And one of the things that's really interesting, given the current state of affairs with the COVID-19, is how all of our dynamics are changing. And I hope to address some of those questions today and also provide you with hopefully some really interesting tidbits of information. And I do want to make this fairly interactive. We have an hour, but I want to make sure that we can dialogue as needed so that we address your questions and your concerns. So one of the things, so JP, what are some of the things that the audience has in their mind in terms of what we're looking at from a security perspective?
Sorry, say that again?
Yeah, so what are some of the things that you've talked to a number of the folks on the call about in terms of what they're interested in hearing about?
Well, a lot of things people are interested in is how do we stay safe and how do we keep from attackers to come into these machines, right? Yeah. I think a lot of the customers, a lot of people that we talk to on a daily basis, they don't think of their copiers or their print devices as a threat. They think they have firewalls and that'll catch everything. So when we kind of scroll back and go under the covers, when we do our security audit, and we'll get into that, we really do find there's a lot of issues happening with it. So that's within the print stuff. So I think that's a big thing that I'd like to make sure that we talk about today, Steve.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thanks for that. And what I wanted to do is just share a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of the threat landscape today. And one of the realities is, believe it or not, 5 and 24, once you plug an internet IoT device in, you will get attacked within 5 minutes and targeted by specific exploits in 24 hours. So let me just say right now, if you're thinking it won't happen to you, shift your mindset, because the reality is you're walking into an octagon every single day. And if you've ever seen an MMA fight, the reality is I could be a 9th degree black belt in whether it's Taekwondo or whatever, and I walk in there, I'm going to get hit regardless. The fact is, how are you going to respond? Are you going to be resilient? Are you going to be able to to consistently identify threats, to parry a particular strike? How are you going to address it? And I'm just here to tell you, get out of the mindset, if you're in it, around it won't happen to us. So it's going to happen, and it may have already happened, and you just don't know about it. And I know this is a bit of a scare tactic, but it's reality. It's what we're facing today. And I think this statistic drives it home. As of COVID-19's introduction, we have seen a 600% increase in cyber threats.
Wow.
These are indicators related to coronavirus. And what you see on the screen, the top is the Johns Hopkins COVID. This is what's happening in market in terms of instances of COVID-19 virus. look at the map below, which is the botnet threat map.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's absolutely
Holy smokes.
insane.
Yeah.
And so what you're seeing is, not only does this mean, okay, we have state actors, state threat actors, we have, what I mean by that is you have like nation state sponsored threat actors like you've all heard about, right, in the news.
Yep.
But you also have individuals and gangs that are out there. And one of the things that they're doing is they're not only just targeting enterprises, they're going down market incredibly fast to SMB and to individual SOHO into the home. Because as you know, with the fact that a majority of businesses have workers remote working from home, they know this and they want to, that's where they're really vulnerable. And so if they're connected to a VPN or some way to the broader network, they don't care if they're in the house or if they're in the office. They're going to try and target it. And they can do so with AI and machine learning capabilities now. And it's just a whole different dynamic. So one of the things we're seeing is that a new piece of malware is created every 4 seconds. That's roughly 300,000 new pieces of code that is available on the dark web and exposed to our internet and our networks, 300,000 in a day. They are not only attacks that are, basic malware attacks or something you'll see, that is attacking either the BIOS of an IoT device or attacking the memory during runtime, but you're seeing just ever more destructive because of the sophistication of these individual pieces of code. Here's a quick look at what's kind of happened over time. And what you're seeing is this huge amount of new malware that is being introduced into the space that we're all inhabiting here. Chafer, Oil Rig, Charming Kitten, NeverQuest, all these fabulous names. Dark Hydrus is out of Iran. These are all just popping up right and left right now based on that map you just saw. And they're looking to become ever more destructive. And so it's not just now what we saw with Petya, NotPetya, and the Mirai botnet back in 2016, but we're getting this in an inordinate number. So this is continually happening every minute. And so the reality is you've got to understand what and how to address this. So I think, JP, what you and I talked about the other day is that those on the call are, there's a lot of question around, well, are printers really a security risk? I mean, I'm sure that those on the call can probably ask themselves this question and, is this just a marketing ploy that HP's pulled together over the last 7 years to talk about security on printers? So the reality is, I'm here to tell you, no. We intentionally put a target on our back by coming out with the claim, world's most secure printers. This applies to our enterprise and managed, what we call future smart firmware-based devices. And we did that intentionally. We knew, and it's not like we didn't think about, oh, we're, by claiming world's most secure, we're not going to get, attacks, and we're not going to become targets of competitors with a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the market. They're always claiming parity. We knew all this was going to happen, and it was intentional because, frankly, it was strategic to raise the bar across the industry and raise awareness around printers and the fact that because there's no antivirus malware detection inherently in printers like PCs, but the reality is printers are basically a PC that prints, and nobody thinks about it like that. And the fact is, we wanted to raise the bar. So we have, and we've got a lot of learning that we're here and sharing with you as good customers of HP and of INTEGR8. So what are the risks associated with printers? Well, number one, I can tell you that, and I'm not just speaking enterprise here, I'm talking, this is across the spectrum of customers, such as yourselves. That 11% now of security incidents reported by organizations over the last year have been print related. And this includes things like data loss from documents left in the output tray. And if you don't have a good secure pull printing capability, you better get one fast, because the reality is that is just as much a threat as an external attack. There's a majority of some of these attacks do come from internal staff members, employees, that are looking to exfiltrate data out of your enterprise or out of your company. And so you want to make sure that you have the appropriate security steps in place and protections in place that printers before this have not had, that you have on your PCs, for example. The other thing is to note on this slide is that $13 million is the average annualized cost of cybercrime per each one of you on this call. And you're like, huh? How does that make sense? Addressing a cyber attack is massive. It doesn't just impact the potential revenue that you're trying to drive and bring in every day. You also have the costs associated with your employees. If you have to shut down your plant, like we just had in Northern Idaho, we had a large multi-million-dollar manufacturing facility. They had a competitive printer to HP in their environment and a fleet of them. The attacker got in, stayed resident under the radar in that device, and then moved laterally, getting ever more increased permissions to go into the network of the manufacturing company. They did so, and they were able to create a and release a ransomware attack. So it's not just they go in through the front door of the printer, and then they release the attack. And so they're doing that more and more. And this particular customer was down for 2 weeks and had to pay all of the salaries of their employees in the factory, as well as the impact to their brand and their revenue from a sales perspective. So it's also cleaning it up. The average time it takes to identify a cyber attack on average, or a threat, is on average 200 days. This is even in enterprise. So keep in mind that you better have the appropriate protections in place, or you're going to fall victim to this kind of activity. Here are some other realities. Peter Kim, who is one of our penetration testers and a hacker and author, gave a perfect example of this. Said, hey, we go and we look for a multifunction printer, and it doesn't have to be a printer. It can be a webcam. It can be any IoT device that's got an IP address. I could right now on this computer for you go to a website called shodan.io. I can then do a search of available IoT devices by their IP address. And from there, I can have a field day. A lot of printers have been attacked this way. A lot of IoT devices have been attacked this way. Peter did this. And he just goes in, he looks for an MFP, he sees that it's configured with default passwords like admin or password as the password or no password. And then he's in. It's that easy. And so you can see the initial foothold I articulated earlier is the printer. The PCs are harder to attack because they have antivirus and anti-malware. We at HP have developed in our defense in depth layered approach on our devices and with our ability to wrap with solutions like Jet Advantage Security Manager, the ability to effectively give you malware and antivirus for printers. But you need to rely on the OEM, and many of you have a multi-vendor fleet, and that's fine. absolutely. But make sure that all of your devices are following the same compliance and are secured. So I mentioned earlier, printers are a whole lot like PCs, and people don't realize this. So we had a meeting with a very large international banking institution last November. They came into our welcome center at HP in Boise, and it was my opportunity to present. And I asked them all, I said, and previous to that, I had access to their device fleet and access to their securely, remotely, access to their network. And they walk in and I said, so I showed this slide and I said, what do you guys do today to protect your PCs? Oh, they go off and, you know, we do this and we do this and we do this. We say, then, and what about your printers? It's blank stare. Their mouth kind of goes, well, why? Why do we have to worry about printers? Well, it's because of this. The reality is they are PCs. They have hardware. They accept email. Very easy. Just because it's behind the firewall doesn't mean it's secure. I can't tell you how many phishing emails have come to control panels that you're seeing here on these printers, and an end user is authenticating into the device, opening that email, boom. They don't even know that malware has then been introduced into the environment of the device, and it's available for them to move laterally into the network, all behind the firewall. So if you say or hear someone saying to you, well, our printers are fine, they're behind the firewall, they're secure. There's an example of why they're not in every case. They all have network access. This is the most important thing. These devices are all internet connected. Thus, they're potentially exposed, as I said earlier, to the broader network. They have firmware and software. That's memory operations are a great opportunity. That's the time these devices are most vulnerable, is when they're in runtime and people are using them. So you got to think differently about your IoT devices, not just printers. Okay, so what are the realities about vulnerabilities in printers? This is data. We have a team, our Print Security Advisory Services team, that goes out and works with you and all of you individually. We can give access to them, as well as our larger enterprise customers that we work with. This is data from across 200 enterprise companies. This is today's reality around printer security risks. Have they truly taken action? They can say they think it's a risk, but are they doing anything about it? And what we're finding is that half of organizations, even in the enterprise space, have a print security policy in place. And what do I mean by a policy? What I mean by that is they have an aggregated, appropriate best practice policy around the configuration settings of the printer. And they can manage that across the fleet. Are they up to date on firmware? 42% are not running updated firmware. Okay, we understand the challenges that printers have. I have solutions that I'm running on them. I have I have them in different production environments. I'm working with them to do different tasks. So yes, it's complex. And it's not as easy as a quick auto firmware update across all of your fleet. And you may not want to do that, and that's understandable, but you need to consistently update firmware for the very basic reason of security protections. You have the latest security protections on the new firmware. And it's before this, the reality of firmware updates has traditionally been, oh, we want a new function, we want new functionality, or we want a new enhancement to the capability of the software or of the printer. But now you've got to look at it as a best first step and think firmware first for security.
Steve, I'm surprised at 42%. I would have thought it'd be lower from, with our customers, and when we engage with our customers, a lot of organizations are actually keeping up with their firmware, and
they're not. They're really not. And this is over 1.2 million aggregated fleet of printers. Yeah. So you're right, it may not be as surprising as you're saying because of the challenges of it, right?
Right.
And again, here, just to kind of to go to the next slide, 69% of businesses don't have anti-malware capabilities in their printers, and they're not enabled. Wrong configurations is a big issue. Nearly 6 out of 10 fail to require user passwords on printers. And they don't comply with their broader security policy of the company. And the other thing is, every one of these printers, you probably are aware, have what are called syslogs, system logs. So every event that is happening on that printer, whether it's opening a paper tray, that's an event. Those are all captured in system logs. No one's monitoring that. 85 to 90% of large companies, and you can just expand that for SMB, aren't monitoring the syslogs of the devices for threats and threat patterns. So we're looking at all of this. This is what customers have told us are their greatest print infrastructure concerns. One is the connection between the MFP and the central network. The next is the apps running on the device. MFP is a point of entry, which we talked about earlier, very much a high concern. And then you get this whole concept of denial of service attacks and unauthenticated document access. So these are some of the key areas. I would love to hear from you when we get to the Q&A if you're also concerned about these items and what other ones you're concerned about that aren't noted here. Things like printers being botnetted together into a network and to be used for a denial of service attack, which is just flooding the devices and the sites and customer locations and internet domains with just an inordinate amount of traffic, and that shuts them down. So I know you're very proud Canadians. I'm very excited that that's the case. However, I will burst a little bit of your bubble here, and you can hate me forever, but the reality is you're going to get an attack. Are you protected? Can you detect the attacks, and how quickly can you recover? The most important thing you can do is to be resilient. And what do I mean by resilience? Resilience is the ability to recover quickly without a lot of IT intervention, without a lot of cost, and to get back up online and working again. Because the reality today is you're going to get hit. So what do? You want to be secure, put the appropriate defenses in place, and then be ever resilient in terms of the ability to recover quickly. Well, recovery takes identification of the threat and the fact that you've been attacked. And then protection, even before that, should hopefully catch some of those that come in that you don't know are coming in. So you have the protection, the detection, and the recovery or resilience. That's how you want to build your strategy. And you also want to build this with proactive monitoring of the network for threats. So at HP, this is something we're really happy about, proud about, and feel is really critical. And so we are the only vendor with NIST. That's the NIST 800-193 standard for certified for cyber resiliency. We have the only running firmware and software that has been third-party certified through Security Innovations SDPAC certification program that stands for Secure Development Practices Assessment Certification. And what that means is the question about are your applications and software running on your printers secure or built with and developed with security in mind? Yes, this validates that for all of the HP firmware, software, and even third-party solutions that are running on our printers. This means that they are following best practices of security in developing the software. This does not, and nor will we ever, say that HP devices and our software cannot be attacked or hacked. No one can say that. If anybody says that, walk out the door. They don't understand security. The reality is it's constant, as I said earlier. So the other really important thing is not just the devices and supplies need to be secure in the hardware, but you need solutions like Security Manager from HP to monitor and manage and remediate all of this configuration settings of the printers in your fleet. The only nearest competitor we have is Xerox here with what they call their compliance watchdog. Security, that particular solution is monitoring 8 settings on devices that have upwards of 300, and it does it 1 device at a time. I give kudos to Xerox for bringing that into the market. However, it's limited. What you want is something like Security Manager, where you monitor all up to 300 different device configuration settings. You set the policy that can be applied automatically to new printers that come into the network, so they are in compliance when you buy a new printer, for example. It is all around monitoring those devices for insurance that they are the configuration of the printers are in a secure state. And this is, you can then in turn output reports to ensure you're following the appropriate regulatory frameworks from a security perspective that you have to follow, whether, you know, depending upon what specific environment you're having to deal with.
And sorry, Steve, just on top of that too, like what I really like about that product and when it calls home, especially, you know, when the device goes down or if it needs a new formatter board or something like that, you know, it can be missed by the IT department or to go back onto the machine, or they didn't even know that there was an issue with it. So I love that when we do have this security tool on, that it actually automatically updates it and it's all done, and the IT guys just wipe their hands. They don't have to do anything to lock it down when it comes back up. So I think that's a fantastic part of that.
That's great.
Yeah.
You know, one of the other aspect of this, you can configure your own policy.
Yeah.
So if you want to turn off SNMP v1 and v2 and enable SNMP v3, which is what we recommend, assuming it's not going to break any of your solutions or your drivers, then you do that. You know, and it also has built into it what we call a constraints engine. And this is, I won't go into too much more detail because your team at INTEGR8 can do this. But the important thing to remember is this constraints engine gives you the ability, it alerts you if you change a setting in your policy that's going to negatively impact your environment, it'll let you know.
Yeah.
And so it's a great tool.
And just for the people on the call, what kind of attacks actually happen on printers? You know, so can you give them an example of what that would look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, some of the things that we're seeing here is really you look first in hardware and firmware. So software exploits, things like what we call buffer overflow. This is like a denial of service attack on a device. Any misconfigurations. If you don't have an admin password on your devices, you're just asking for it. Misconfiguration of ports, like 9100 or other misconfigurations in the devices can lead to a real easy exploit. Code injection. This is some of the attacks are somehow you get malware in there and they can inject code into even the BIOS of the boot up as well as into runtime memory. The other piece is open networks, network ports and application vulnerabilities. So one of the things that a printer does and shouldn't do too frequently is reach out beyond the firewall to a DNS server. If for some reason that network traffic from the printer is happening rapidly, that is a clear indication of what is called a network behavior anomaly that is detected with the embedded capability of Connection Inspector in the HP devices. This is what's happening with that is that the hacker is remote in the cloud somewhere or on the internet, and he's trying to get command and control and connection to that printer. And what it's doing is it's going through his code is creating dynamically new host names, and it's cycling through those host names every millisecond to try and ensure that it can get connection to that DNS server. So it's doing that, and we detect that kind of activity and shut it down, expunge it from the device, and get it back running without IT intervention. So again, the users, You know, I mentioned unauthenticated access at the control panel, if you have a control panel on the device. Low-level system firmware BIOS attacks. We can talk more about that. Phishing emails I talked about earlier. USB injection of malware code. So these are all the things you're seeing in terms of actual attacks. So here are some that I'm going to share with you in addition to the one I mentioned earlier of that manufacturing facility up in Coeur d'Alene. But this Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center, they caught state-sponsored hackers out of Russia using IoT devices, a voice over IP phone, an office printer, and a video decoder to breach networks across multiple locations. So 2 of the cases they deployed without changing any default passwords. In the 3rd instance, they had not been, you know, there's no security firmware update had been applied. So these are end of life, you know, end of support life or whatever. They're not updating their firmware, and this is a vulnerability. Once they got access, then they go to ever higher value data. They get escalated permissions, and they can do that with code. They can just get free off of the dark web, and they just add that into their code to execute. And so they can get that ever more secure access. Another is a fax machine attack. Believe it or not, the pervasive feeling is, well, analog fax is really, really secure. Well, it is to a point, and believe it or not, faxing is increasing by about 32% every year, and a lot of this is driven by healthcare. Obviously, the faxes go, and the concept that faxing is much more secure, a method of communication. But it's interesting, Checkpoint did an analysis, and you can actually exploit the fax capability of the MFPs. And so what they did is they took over a device by faxing malicious code disguised as an image file, and then infiltrated the network through that printer or that fax capability. So just be aware around that sensitive files in a subnetwork, and separate those from your network printers. In addition, I'll mention to you that ransomware is dramatically increasing, and that's more and more happening. So this is just one of the realities of the shift in the attacks that are happening and the rationale and motivation for them. They're looking at ransomware, and they're looking at how to shut down broad infrastructure. But the ransomware attacks are going down market, and they're definitely going down into SMB. So be aware. So what are we doing? We've talked about all this. What can you do with HP and with Integrate to really drive and increase your security, what we call your security posture as a company? So don't think of security as a segment. So just because you're in SMB, you are what we would call security unfamiliar, which is okay. You can be a 5 to 10 person SMB, and if you're working with the Department of Defense, you better have a security insistent mindset, or you're not going to be doing business with the Department of Defense. So this is why I say security is a mindset. So think about your own and how you as a company are approaching security broadly. How important is it? Do you have a global security policy in place, not just for IoT? What are the things you have? Do you have a security policy in place at all? And it's okay if you don't. Just be aware, Integrate can help you get there. And that's why, one of the reasons we're having this talk is to expose you to some of the realities that you're facing. So the way to think about this from our perspective is consider yourself either security unfamiliar, and I don't mean oblivious here from a negative perspective. It's most consumers, including me, have found that, oh my gosh, I go home and I have a very unsecure network. I don't have WPA2 encryption on my Wi-Fi password. I only have WPA. Well, that's not enough. So one of the things you want to do is just assess where you are in this, and Integrate can approach you based on where your comfort zone is in terms of how you're approaching security. And then you're probably, most of you are in the security aware space where you may understand that we need to secure our printers. We have some basic measures in place and you care about security fundamentally for operations, but it's easy to get sucked into what some of our competitors are talking about when they say, oh, we'll guarantee you prevention. There's no such thing as guaranteed prevention. Or they say things like, you're good enough security. You don't need the HP fleet because, oh, it's just good enough. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't want good enough security on my home. I don't want it on my business either. And it's not overkill when you look at the value add that you get from the embedded capabilities of our printers and our security insistent customers. Now, this is where you may potentially have a security team and you understand printer security risks. Now, you can fall anywhere on this continuum, and hopefully you want to migrate upwards from the left into the insistent, just from a secure posture perspective. And that's what Integrate and with HP support will help you do. Quickly, this is our track record of security innovation and first to market. So I won't belabor this, but just to let you know, I feel very confident. It's why I moved to HP, that we, without question, are the undisputed leader, and our third-party analysts also mention this. But this just gives you some of the new innovations that we're bringing to market, including what I mentioned is the SD pack. We created that in partnership with Security Innovation, and it's their third-party validation of software development. And then the ability to have these unique embedded capabilities like our Sure Start BIOS protection, our connection inspector, and intrusion detection, runtime. So these are some of the innovations. When you think about security, and from an HP perspective, this is how we do think about it, is it's an end-to-end approach. It's not just devices. It's not just here. You've got to think about device security, yes, but that's the fundamentals. And supplies, yes. You have to think about data. You have to think about document. And in this space, you're talking about solutions and software applications, workflow processes, everything that's connected to your back ends, your ERP systems. All of this from these IoT devices needs to be secure. And of course, the cloud infrastructure needs to be secure. You need monitoring and management for compliance. We offer that. And you need to have the ability to get quick assessments of your current state by Integrate, and they can provide these security services in across the board. So this is how we think about this defense in depth, is it's not just about the devices. So let's talk about the devices and specifically HP. And I'm going to share with you an experience, and hopefully this works and you can hear the audio. I may have to reshare, so bear with me a minute. But I want to point out, this kind of brings to life, we did our own hack on ourselves. And again, I mentioned earlier, the ability to protect, detect, and recover from attacks is absolutely critical, because software security is not enough. So let's take a look at, these are what we call the big four, and now big five with Security Manager. These are the different things I talked about that are embedded in our enterprise and managed printers. Our pro devices do have some of these capabilities. And that's why they say oftentimes they're best in class security, because against competitive printers in the pro space. But what we're talking about here is our enterprise and managed, and that's from the 500 series up. And you're looking at, and soon we're going to introduce a new 400 series enterprise. But what you're seeing here is these enterprise devices have BIOS protection and self-healing. Self-healing is critical. And this is what happens in BIOS boot up. If we detect, the device detects a malware code, it will automatically shut the device down and reboot from a golden copy of the BIOS and of the firmware that's embedded in the hardware. So there's a golden copy, and it will then reboot from that. And that basically, that process gets rid of the malware in the BIOS level. Then we have whitelisting, which is very much consistent with other vendors. They have whitelisting. Ours is the only one that's common criteria certified. And this keeps the firmware safe and that it's validated to be running on the device by HP. Runtime intrusion detection is monitoring the most vulnerable time when printers are exposed. And that's when they're running, when they're actually being used. And this is monitoring the real-time memory of the device and the applications of the device itself. And then the network calls I mentioned earlier about network connections to outbound servers. And that's what Connection Inspector, and then of course, all wrapped up with security management capability with our security manager. These 4 are embedded and free in the printers. You don't pay for more for these. They're part of the device capability. It's an added value from HP. You do pay for security manager, but these you don't. So I just want to be clear. So let me share this video. And again, I'm going to have to exit out, and then I'm going to go ahead and share with you this video. So let me first share it again. So I'm going to stop sharing. Then, sorry about this rigmarole, but it's just how Zoom makes it available for me to share the sound and optimize the screen sharing for video. So here we go. Hopefully you can hear this.
We are here today to talk about embedded printer security features. These features are designed to address today's cybersecurity threats, recognizing that firewalls and device protection only during boot up are not sufficient against the latest hacker strategies and tool sets. It only takes a click on an email or to hit print in an attachment for a malware attack to deploy within the network. And devices like printers are a good place to hide since they are generally not being monitored by security. Now, ethically, we can't hack a competitor's device, so we're going to use 2 HP MFPs, one with and one without the feature. We have set up a special computer monitor to watch the activity going on inside the printer's RAM. We are also watching on the control panel for a reaction. We'll start the demo on the device without runtime intrusion detection, but first let's think about what might happen when the attack occurs. The machine might crash, start spewing pages, or the hacker could hold it for ransom or use it as a gateway to the rest of the network. Okay, inject the malware into the printer and we'll see what happens. You can see on the monitor that the malware code has been injected. It's starting to disrupt the memory, and we can see the words kernel stomp. This is indicating that the code is doing something it shouldn't. But notice on the control panel that nothing is happening. And this is actually the worst case scenario. The injected malware is inside the printer and going about its business, and yet no one knows it's happening. Now, let's compare what just happened to the same test on a printer with the runtime intrusion detection feature. On the control panel, you can see the device is at a ready state. Let's inject the malicious code. The control panel shows immediately that an intrusion has been detected. Simultaneously, the machine is sending a syslog error message, which could be set up to feed the organization's threat monitoring system, such as a SIM tool, to alert the security team. You can see the printer is rebooting to clear the memory. This was initiated by the runtime intrusion detection feature. And as the device is rebooting, it will run through a series of checks to see if the core operating software has been modified by the malware. First, HP SureStart checks the BIOS, and if problems are found, it will automatically initiate another reboot to reload the BIOS from a golden copy stored inside the printer's hardware. Next, the firmware will be compared against a whitelist of approved HP-signed versions. These checks happen every time the printer is booted up. Soon, the printer will be back to the same state it was in prior to the attack. There was no disruption to users, no service call, and no need for the IT administrator to be involved. This ability to detect, protect, and automatically recover is unique to HP.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let me ask any questions of the audience before we move on. Any questions about these embedded capabilities?
No.
Okay. I'm glad it was that clear, so that's good. Just quickly, a highlight on Security Manager. You can see here the ROI you get when you deploy Security Manager into your environment. So you'll see that less than 25% of the fleet initially before use of Security Manager complied with the security policy, 97 after the use of it. 4 hours to report status and address compliance issues. This reduces down to 3. And then, you can use WebJet Admin, 12 servers with continuous network traffic, where you only need a single on-prem server for up to 10,000 devices for Security Manager. It's currently on premise. We are working on a cloud capability for the fall of 21. So what do you need to do? Getting started. This is really important. 1, engage with Integrate. They will do a great, help you with running an assessment, and then develop a good security plan moving forward for your organization. Quickly, I won't spend a lot of time on this. I just want you to know that, yes, it's not just HP kind of pounding our chest a little bit about our security leadership, but it's Keypoint, IDC, and Quocirca, and I'm really excited to share with you this. This is the first time as of February of this year that a third party has appropriately established the first baseline for security of MFPs and printers. What I mean by that is we have been screaming for this with the analysts for years because customers have, it's really hard to assess and compare HP to other vendors. And how do I know that I'm getting what they're saying I should be getting? And is there a level playing field and similar terminology around security in print and security in printers? This is the first foray that starts to level the playing field. It's done by Keypoint Intelligence. They purchased InfoTrends and then purchased Buyers Lab. And Buyers Lab is a test lab and for printing and imaging devices and other IoT devices. What's interesting here is they have established 3 levels of security testing validation. What I mean by that is the first was device penetration, and they did it through a third party, this company called Context, which is a focused test lab. In addition, they tested policy compliance of the devices and how resilient is the firmware in the printer. So these 3 levels of security testing. What happened is that HP is the only OEM print vendor that has passed all 3. And to show you the timeline of how this happened, 7 print OEMs came into the fray with BLI back in September of 19. So all 7 of us said, yeah, let's start with device penetration. Then 2 dropped out by October. Then the remainder, 2 more dropped out because they didn't want to try it again because they had so much to do, candidly, to get past this first device penetration validation. And then we got actually, we tested all 3, and in November we got all 3, but I just carry this forward because we didn't want to go public because we want this to be really an industry capability. So we wanted somebody to get it. And so we finally ended up in February of 20, after 4 times for Ricoh, I believe, and 3 for Xerox, we were, the 3 companies were able to release the fact that we all got the device penetration seal. Well, HP, though, back in November, got policy compliance, firmware resilience as well, in addition to device penetration. So this is just the reality, and then COVID hit. And so we haven't heard any more if other vendors are trying to get this first device penetration seal. But I wanted to share with you, and these are just a little bit around who was Keypoint worked with and BLI worked with to do the testing, Context and AtSec on the different levels. And so this is one of the key linchpins now, and we're thrilled to know and to be able to say, we have all 3 seals, and it's hopefully going to be really good for you, the customer, to be able to simplify what you're looking for in terms of print security across the board. How has COVID-19 changed the landscape? Well, this is a real quick hit. it's literally 30,000% increases in malware activity and in attacks. 907,000 total spam messages related to COVID starting, this is all in Q1 of this year. I won't belabor all of these stats, but it's just totally, ramped up the threat landscape dramatically. So what do you need to do in terms of this impact with more workers working from home? And it's really important that you help to educate your employees around being a security warrior. Don't fall for clickbait. Think before you open a link. Social media is widely populated with bad actors, so be very careful there. Know what you have. I mean, there are many IoT and smart devices that are there. Take inventory of those. Change your passwords. Use strong, good encryption where available on your network and with the IoT devices, whether that's your Wi-Fi mesh or your printers. Ensure all devices have the latest firmware, and disable all unnecessary ports and protocols. And your team at Integrate can help with this. And secure the sensitive data. So use UPD from HP. Do what you can to have your printer use PIN and passwords to release jobs, print jobs. All of this is really important, and ensure you have a VPN that is used. So the other piece that you often don't think about is keep your devices clean. And I know that the HP team will be working with Integrate to help you with this and give you some greater information around this.
Yep.
So to wrap up, thank you all for your time. We're going to open it up to questions and answers. And I wanted just to relay this, that right now, my strong recommendation is that you work with JP and his team at Integrate to really begin and do the assessment. And there's 3 great tools that they can work with you on to get a real good and instantaneous picture of your security posture. So thanks very much. So open to any questions.
Great, thank you. That was awesome. Yeah, there's a few questions here. So one of them is a quick question on the server. Does it have to be dedicated server, or can it be added onto the existing print server in the environment?
No, it does not have to be dedicated. It can be just added on.
Okay. And then there's another question here. Can you discuss pricing expectations on the Jet Advantage Security Manager? So yeah, if you want pricing and you want more information on it, please reach out to your representative at Integrate. They'll be more than willing to have a conversation and talk to you about what would be involved in pricing that out, what it would look like. And then are there best practice documents available to help implement security? So examples, how to subnet your printers on your network. What ports are required, number 1. And is there a guide is there a guide to initially lock down your printer configuration?
Yeah, so absolutely. And we can share that. And I know there's quite a few assets available to give you best practices around print security. So happy to share those out through your Integrate team. And we'll definitely answer all those questions.
Okay. And then one last question here is, this person, I guess, they've been having trouble disabling SNMP1 in their environment. What resources exist to help me with my printing issues I have? And to help me issues I have when I'm doing this and try to raise the level 1 SMP. So yes, we can definitely help you out, John, with that. That's not a problem. If you can contact your representative at Integrate, and we'll help you out with that, no problem. So thank you very much. If anyone wants, what we're doing right now is we're offering a free assessment for everything. So for your print environment. So we're more than happy to put this software on there, let it run. And then what we can do is we can come back and let you know what best practices are and how we can help you make sure your devices are safe and secure, so that you're not going to be exposed to all these bad malware out there. So, Steve, thank you very much. Did you want anything else to say?
No, I just I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you, and just stay vigilant. And hopefully, you've got a great partner in Integrate with all they're doing, and we're here to back you up. So thanks so much for all your time.
Yes, thank you everyone for your time. We will send this video out. It's all been recorded, so if you wanted to share it with anybody else within your organization, you can. And we'll go from there. Thank you very much, and have a great day, everybody.